And we are live. Hi, everyone. Who's here? I know Semi's here. Semi's been here. I really, really hope that we don't get blacklisted from BookTube after this live or Book Twitter or any of the bookish communities, because I don't know. I don't feel like I'm going to be holding back. Are you going to be holding back in this live?
I don't think we ever hold back though. So I'm trying to get to the actual. There it goes. Okay. Yeah, I don't think we ever hold back. Like anytime you, I, or Brittany get on live, like ever.
I know. We're always brutally honest, and sometimes that's to our own detriment.
I don't
But
think we're half as bad ever as we are in our group chat.
very true. Our group chat is like brutal. It's like savage.
Yeah, we're low key terrible people in our group chat.
Okay. You gotta have a place where you can just unleash.
Release it all.
Release it all. Let it all out. Okay, so the name of this live is In Defense of Romance, Surviving the Romance Reader's Stigma. Okay. So where do we even want to start with this? I feel like there's so many nuances. I don't know where to begin.
You know what's interesting to me, because you and Brittany aren't super on Twitter. I'm not really on it at all. I like get on it. I don't really tweet all that often at all.
Yeah.
But what's kind of funny to me is that there's this like thought process that like, and I've actually seen people say that romance readers are very defensive and overly defensive on social media. And I'm always just like, well, I mean, since the beginning of there ever being writing, there's always been a stigma specifically against romance. It isn't a new thing where all of a sudden, we can't go out in public and be like looked at weird if there's a guy with no shirt on in front of the cover. Like that's been a thing for forever. I was like in middle school, like, oh, I'm not going to bring this to my class. I do not even want to hear what someone was going to say. Like it's not something that just like all of a sudden happened with social media. It's just, I feel like social media aired out a lot of what people think about us though. Cause some things people say, I'm always just like, y'all, it's not that deep. Like it shouldn't be such a big deal for a group of people to enjoy reading something, which can we talk about that? Romance is the highest ranking genre of books there are in general. It makes the most money, has the most readers. On average, people say that romance readers actually read more books than any other genre out there. And yet we're always the ones to get something said about us, which brings me to my first question. I have to ask this going
Hold on. Before we dive deep, I've got to let the people on Instagram know that we're doing this live.
Okay. I did Twitter.
I know quite a few people that would never forgive me.
If you did not.
Yeah, people in my real life where we've had this conversation numerous times. So short commercial break.
I put it on Twitter. I'll put it on Instagram. Where is my phone?
Hi, everyone. Troy and I are doing a live stream right now on my channel, Oshi Reads, where we're going to be breaking down just the stigma behind being a romance reader and being a proud romance reader, the stigma in the book community. So definitely come check it out. If you love romance, enjoy reading romance, we are live right now. There we go. I always like to plug this because people always people in my real life are like, oh, I wish I had known, like I would have loved to,
My childhood friend always tells me, but I never remember to text her. Because we sometimes we talk about books a lot, but I just never remember.
There we go. So now you can get mad at me later.
Right.
So moving on to your question.
Oh, right. So my question is, because this kind of is how we even got to the point of deciding to do a live, is how do you feel, because this is like a big booktube thing, about people, specifically people who don't actually read romance, labeling videos trashy romances I love my favorite trashy romance is something with the word trashy in it to mean romance.
It's so interesting you mentioned that because in one of my vlogs, I think one of my NaNoWriMo vlogs from last year, if I can find it, I will link it in the description box of this live once we've wrapped. But I actually go into a long diatribe about how I don't believe in labeling the things that you like trash. And I also don't believe in guilty pleasures. I feel like if you like something, you shouldn't feel guilt behind that. There's a reason that you like that, and it's okay. You need to stand in your truth. It's a part of your interests, a part of who you are. And if you do feel guilt or shame, you need to kind of explore that and figure out why. And then, labeling something trashy, I don't agree with that. Now, there are books that are actually trash books, right? Based on certain criteria that most people can agree on, it's either poorly written or holds like certain stereotypes or pushes certain values or moral codes that are reprehensible for whatever reason, right? That is what I would consider trash. Like, oh, this book promotes misogyny. This book promotes, rape or incest. I mean, I could go on and on about like just morally reprehensible things and damaging things that certain books could either overtly promote or covertly promote. And you're like, okay, this is trash. I don't believe in this. That is understandable. But when I see a lot of these booktubers labeling, books that may fall in like the BDSM category, the more raunchier, more sexually explicit books, erotica, but a romance that straddles on erotica, books that take like a lot of the big tropes, like, maybe like I'm having the prince's baby, or like, student teacher romance, which I freaking hate, but we can go into that on at a different time. Like, when people label things like that trash based upon the perception of what the book is about, not going into, oh, the writing was this, or it promoted ideas that I don't believe in, but it's just trashy because of the cover or because it's sexually explicit, that I do not agree with. That I think is wrong. Like, that's not okay. Like, we need to, that word trash is being thrown around too liberally in that sense for me. And if you do feel it's trash, why are you reading trash? And then you're like, I loved it, or I gave it 5 stars, and I'm just very confused. I'm like, so what about it is trash? I don't get it. That's my
Same.
only.
My thing about it is that, okay, for me, especially when I was younger and when I first started reading romance in, like, I don't know, middle school, I think, my version of trash was like somebody took General Hospital, the soap opera, and made it into a book. That was my version of it. Like, it was just so unrealistic, so ridiculous that it was just like trash. But
That's
then,
poor storytelling. So there's a reason that it's trash.
yeah.
It's
And
not
so
believable.
I actually watched someone's video, and in the video, it was a trash romances, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt." And
Right.
I watched the video, and I was just like, some random like YA book was in it that had barely any kissing. It was basically just angst the whole book. Like, and there was like no sex. I'm just like, so then what was trash about it? Are you just
Right.
that it's stereotypical, it's formulaic? Like, whenever I review, like, I have a video on my channel for my favorite YA romances. And I don't like Nicholas Sparks. I literally only read one book from him. And like I said in that video, it was because I was like super into Miley Cyrus. So I read The Last Song.
I like that book.
I love The Last Song. It's probably my favorite book from when I was younger. Other than that, I have never really read Nicholas Sparks. I've never even seen The Notebook, or remember. I have not sat through them. I just don't. I don't really have.
Hold on, real quick. Bree says we canceled Nicholas
We
Sparks.
did, because he's a douche face. So
his racist comments.
yeah, he's just a douche. But I don't particularly like Nicholas Sparks. But then I don't then go and read all his books just to create this big video about it, to where I, like, I'm just saying like, oh, I hate this about him, I hate this about him. I don't care. Like, like,
Yeah.
If he whatever he says at this point, I'm just like, oh, I'm not shocked. You're like,
You suck.
but in that video, I mentioned that like I don't know word for word what I said, but basically that those were just like books I liked back then, and that now when I reread them, I'm just like, oh man, this book is really
It's not the best
not
book.
good. It's
Yeah.
really not good. Like it's bad, but I wouldn't go as far as to then like label it trashy romances I read when I was younger because there was really nothing particularly trash about it. Like I could understand how 12-year-old me really thoroughly enjoyed this book where they were on a road trip together to college. Like
Right.
I could honestly see why I would like it.
Yes.
I can honestly see why people like 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight, but I'm not going to sit there and then like pretend that I wasn't a part of that craze of,
Right.
you know, like there are so many booktubers who will sit there and be like, Twilight is toxic, like you shouldn't have liked that. And then they probably have some like photo on Facebook somewhere of them wearing Edward Cullen on their shirt. I'm just like, there's
Yes.
no reason to be embarrassed by it. It is what it is. You were who you were back then. And
Yes.
I still literally have, I told you and Brittany this in our group chat, I have the sweatshirt that said, I don't want to be a monster somewhere in my storage. Like I still own it. I will not sit here and pretend like, oh, I hate Twilight and yeah, I may not be super into it now. Like when we reread it, I was just like, oh my God, this is torture. But
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit here and then pretend like that wasn't a part of it just because I got older and realized some things weren't okay.
Yes.
Like if you dislike something and for you that's just a turn off, that doesn't equate to it being trashy because just as much as someone may not like, I don't know, someone grabbing her, someone else may like it. That doesn't automatically mean it's trashy per se. Like if it's trash, like okay, everyone agrees that 50 Shades of Grey is trash. That is just like an all around. Everyone seems to think that it's trash. But
It's
if you
horribly written. That's what it is.
it's horribly written.
Badly written.
Like the contents of it, like the whole story really wasn't that bad. In retrospect, that's what intrigued me about it. The writing was just bad.
The execution was terrible.
Yeah. Like, and there's nothing really like wrong with that. But I think what, especially on BookTube and Book Twitter, like gets the lines blurred is that popularity does not equate to talent. There are so many popular books in the YA fantasy range that I find terrible. But then I don't go and like, for instance, you know, I hate Cinder.
I know.
Brittany, no, I hate that book. I really want to finish it just to get to the rest of it, but I can't. But I have never made a video and then said, trashy YA fantasy I hate. The lack of intimacy was the part that made me toss it. I feel you.
I feel like we're going to talk about the comments in just a second, but in the response to what you were saying, I feel that negativity sells, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of times people are looking for clicks. It's like clickbait. People are looking for views, and people know that negativity, especially on this platform on YouTube, but even more so in our little corner in BookTube, because when videos go viral on BookTube, it's very easy to see. Like it comes like they come up in your recommendeds all the time. Like YouTube is literally like shoving these videos down your throat. And negativity is very popular. Unfortunately, people love rant reviews. People love reading or watching videos about people. People love watching videos where booktubers rip apart books and just go in. And I mean, it is what it is. Like, that's just what people want to see. So I feel like a lot of times people put a lot of energy into reading books that they purposefully know they won't like. Like, for example, I have seen videos where people who don't even read romance or like it, but it's not like they're going into it like, oh, you know, a friend of mine recommended this romance to me. I don't typically like romance or I'm not experienced with it, but I'm willing to give it a try. It's like they're going into it already knowing that they're going to hate it, or they've made up their minds that they're going to hate it. Like I found the worst reviewed romance books via Goodreads or Amazon, and I'm going to read them and vlog about it. And this is my reading vlog, or this is my, and I'm just like, on one hand, I'm like, okay, well, do you like, if you want to put your energy into making these types of videos and this is your brand, and then do you. But on the other hand, I'm like, but then don't get mad when people who love the genre come for you. Don't get mad when people are like, this is so unfair. Because a lot of times those people aren't just saying like, these books are bad. They're saying, oh, this is why I hate romance. And they paint like all of romance under these like 5 books that they deliberately went out and found that are like reviewed horribly. And they
Yep.
made this huge rant review video about it, but now they're mad that people are like angry, like romance readers are angry and romance lovers are mad. Like, I'm just like, it doesn't make sense. Make it make sense.
That, or I hate the ones where they're, hold on, I have a romance book right here. I hate when they'll go, guys, okay, I'm gonna do something a little controversial. I'm gonna read a romance. You know, I hate romances, but I'm gonna give it a try. And I'm just like, what was this intro for? Just say.
Like, I don't go into, like, I don't read like thriller books, right? Or true crime. If I decide I'm going to pick up a true crime novel or like Gone Girl or something that's outside of my usual taste, I'm not going to be like, guys, I freaking hate true crime. I don't hate true crime. I just don't really read it. I can't
Yes.
pick a whole genre that I don't read. That doesn't make sense. It's like, I don't really know anything about this genre or read it, but I hate it all. Like, what? So I'm just going to be like,
it doesn't make any sense. I don't read sci-fi. Like, I just don't. My dad used to make me go to see Star Trek, Star Wars, and I just be sitting there like, I like Star Wars. It's just not something that, like, as far as that goes, Star Wars and Star Trek is sci-fi as I'll get. Like, I did not read Sasha's book because it was sci-fi. It had nothing to do with the fact that it could have been bad. I just wasn't going to read it. Like, I just wasn't. I didn't feel like it. That's why I read Christine's book. Christine's book was a romance, so I read Christine's book because that's something down my line. If a booktuber wrote a fantasy book, I'd probably read it because I like fantasy. But I'm not going to purposely go read someone's book when I know I myself can't surpass my bias for it.
Right. And that's
like, I just won't.
That's the part I think that bothers me. It's not necessarily that, it's not even really what people are doing, right? Because like half the time it's annoying, but I'm not going to put my energy there. It's the fact that they then get mad when people who love romance are annoyed or publicly say something about it. Like, hey, like, I don't like how you blah, 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 whether it be on Twitter or in their comment section. And now all of a sudden they're upset. And I'm just like, well, you definitely painted an entire like genre of books with a bad brush. And now you're mad that I'm trying to tell you that not all romance books or not all, you know, time traveling romances or not all sports romances or not all friends to lovers romances are like this. You picked literally the worst of the bunch and you made a video about it. And I'm trying to educate you and you're angry now, or I'm simply commenting. Like, I may not even be trying to educate you. I might simply just be like, oh, you should try this, or you should look into this. And now all of a sudden it's, you know, well, I don't have to like romance if I don't want to, da 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 da. And I'm just like,
whoa, calm down.
Nobody said you had to do anything.
Like, at all. For instance, I totally disliked Eleanor and Park far beyond before all the controversy amongst the Asian American community started. I just didn't like enjoy the romance aside from that part of it. I did not review it. You have not seen it on my channel. I don't talk about a rainbow. There are people who love Rainbow Rowell. That's great. I loved Fangirl. Some people, I have seen people rip apart Fangirl.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, boo. And I just click out the video.
Yes.
Because that's it. I'm just like, I'm not going to write some thesis dissertation on why Fangirl was an amazing book. I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense. I am not that bothered that you dislike something. To an extent, I think one thing that does bother me, and I see this a lot happening, especially in contemporary genres and romance genres, is when people misinterpret things or they don't get to an ending of the book and the problem they had with the book was resolved. And I see this happen all the time. People will say, oh, I DNF'd at 20% because this happened. And I'm just like, well, that was like the climax of the book. And if you read the book, then that would have been resolved. You could have still hated it. Like, DNF a book if you don't like it. But if you're DNFing it because you went into a book knowing you hate enemies to lovers, and then you proceed to say you hate it, and then just write off the whole trope. It's like, but you didn't really find anything good. You just went in. For instance, I do not believe that The Hating Game is that great of a enemies to lovers romance. I think
I
it's
didn't like it. I actually DNF'd it.
it was kind of boring.
It was boring as hell.
Boring. And I was just like, wow, this is what everyone was talking about. But I was like, okay, I just moved on. I gave it like 3. But it's just like, okay, I get it. A lot of people like that. And a lot of people who don't read romance tended to like that book because it was very tame and it didn't really have like much going on. I didn't think much happened in the book.
Right. Hold
And
on, my dogs are going insane. Hold
yeah,
on.
it's not a live Oshale unless Tobe and wait, what's
Teddy.
the and Teddy are fighting.
What's going on? They want to be let out. So hold on one second.
Uh-huh.
I'm like holding them hostage. So
I'm gonna read some of the comments.
Okay, yeah, you do that.
The thing I hated DNFing is for this thing, then saying they should be taken serious for their opinion on the thing in there. Yes, which is often resolved. Exactly.
Whenever I DNF a book, I always make it very clear if I then choose to talk about the book or review it, like, hey, by the way, I did not finish this book. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I'm just going to tell you, like, up until the point that I stopped, the issues that I was having and why I DNF'd it. But if you want to read it, or if you have something to speak on, like, since you actually finished the book, then I'm willing to listen. But a lot of people give that disclaimer and they just choose, they DNF a book, then they choose to, complain about it. And they pick, like you said, the thing that maybe was resolved towards the end, or the reason that they DNF the book is something that they don't like in general. So it's like, why did you even choose to read this? It's just, it gets really intense. With romance in general, I feel that people tend to look at romance readers as not real readers, right? Like, oh, you read primarily romance? Oh, okay. And it's like looked down upon and it's frowned upon when you either solely read romance, because I know a lot of people who only read romance, or you primarily read romance, and that's just your genre, that's what you like. And so people look down on it, and people feel like you're not a real reader, you're not really reading real books, you're not reading serious books. These books aren't, oh, you just read for entertainment. Oh, okay, as if a fantasy book isn't entertaining, or sci-fi isn't entertaining, or a contemporary isn't entertaining, or historical. It's almost like, because it's romance and the main plot point is two individuals falling in love, that automatically makes it less than, that automatically makes it not as important. And it doesn't make sense, because love is like the number one thing in the universe that people want, in whatever form. It may not be romantic love, it could be like platonic or companionship, or whatever the case may be. It may be non-sexual, but love is like the number one thing as humans, connection, that we want. So I just find it ironic that we're being shamed for enjoying books about the number one thing that people want in the world. I'm like, what? It doesn't make sense.
And you know what's funny to me though is, especially when I see like booktubers and book Twitter who literally only read YA fantasy, then look down on romance. I'm just like, you're reading at high school levels every single day you read. Like, no offense, but that's what it is. Y'all love Harry Potter, and yes, it's an amazing series. I love Harry Potter. But the hardest part about Harry Potter is how long the series gets, not the content. There's nothing complicated about reading Harry Potter. There's just not. It wasn't written to be complicated. I go to class every single day and have to read Shakespeare and decipher what he's saying. That SHIT is hard.
Yes.
But you guys make it seem like because we're reading romance and because there's not some big bad trying to commit genocide, that all of a sudden we aren't reading something all that great. Like, what does Voldemort wanting to commit genocide have to do with me reading about I don't know, like the best friend's brother? I don't get it. Like,
I don't get it either.
It shouldn't be that deep, because I read YA all the time. I read YA fantasy, and what kills me is that I only, as of a year ago, started entering romance into my channel, but I am now known as a romance reader because I have a series on my channel where I recommend it. I'm just like, Okay, but I've been on BookTube for almost 5 years. I legit, for 5 years, only talked about fantasy. Like, I never talked about anything else. But because I entered something else into my line of BookTube, I'm now just, well, she's just a romance reader. She just likes romance. I'm just like, no, it just doesn't make any sense.
That's the part that made me really scared. I remember when I first started BookTube, I went out of my way to not really talk about romance, like, which is weird because I primarily read romance. That's 97% of what I read is romance. Every once in a while, I'll pick up a YA book or I'll pick up a historical. It's not as common. Like, I read more of that stuff when I was younger. The older I've gotten, the more I've just like stuck to more romance. That's
Mm-hmm.
just what I like. But I was very careful when I first started my channel not to harp on that because there is a stigma around being a romance reader. And there are a lot of closeted romance readers. I guarantee you there are a ton of people on this platform that read either majority romance or heavily read romance, but they're not going to introduce it to their channel in that way because they don't want to be painted with that brush. They want to be known as like, you know, for some reason being known on BookTube as like a YA reader is very popular, or fantasy, or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case may be, or even as a reader that's more diverse, like, oh, I like her channel, or I like his channel, or I like their channel. They read a little bit of everything, so I enjoy that. There's something about talking about romance on your channel that makes people automatically not take you as seriously. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they just read romance. They read fluffy, romance books. Like, I'm not going to have anything in common with this reader. I'm not going to subscribe, etc. But what I like that's changing is I feel that more romance readers are coming out of the closet, so to speak. And because
Mm-hmm.
the more they see people post videos about romance and about the romance books that they're reading, the more comfortable they feel also being like, okay, so I also am reading a romance book this month, or, like, I've always loved romance. So I feel like it's becoming more common now, where
Mm-hmm.
a couple years ago on BookTube, like, there weren't that many booktubers openly talking about their love of romance. But I feel like, especially because the YA booktubers, I think, are starting, the big ones and the
Mm-hmm.
medium ones are starting to talk about it, because what most YA fantasy books have a romance plot.
Yeah.
90% of them do. So I feel like that is starting to become more popular. So then it's making it more acceptable to talk about it and more popular in a way.
I agree because I hats off to, like, like, in retrospect, the probably most popular romance booktuber is Peace Love Books.
Yes.
Yes, from Peace Love Books. She's probably the most popular. And what does she have? Like 10 or 11,000, which
Actually, no, the most popular one I thought was Chandler Ainsley.
she doesn't have. Does she have more than Peace
She
Love
has
Books
like
now?
23K.
Okay, so she surpassed then Peace Loves Books. But Chandler Aidsy's pretty new, still to booktube. What's she been here for a year now?
Yes.
Yeah. But I was using Peace Love Books because she's been on here a little bit longer.
Okay.
Uh, every time I would watch her videos, I'm like, well, hats off to her because her whole channel is just romance, and she, like, does not give a
She
shit.
doesn't
She's
care.
just like, I like this. I will go out in public and pull out the book with the abs, and I don't care. And Channel Aisley is like that too. And there's just this very big amount of people coming on to booktube, because I used to have to, like, go to bookstagram, because there's
Yeah.
a lot of romance readers on bookstagram rather than being on booktube, because 9 times out of 10, if the smallest booktuber you find tend to always want to read YA fantasy. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it was also like, if you wanted to get on booktube, all you were being tossed was YA fantasy, and nothing's wrong with that. Again, like you said, I think you and I are very similar in that aspect. When I was younger, especially when I first started reading romance, a lot of things I read were fantasy romances. So I was reading Twilight, but then I would also read other books that were based on fantasy, but then had romance inside of it. But then as I got older, I was just like, oh, okay. And I started to realize that YA characters, I just couldn't connect to the older and older I got. So it was just like, oh, okay, well, if I'm going to read a fantasy, they need to be a little bit older than 18, because I don't find them interesting anymore
Right.
until I started to just specifically read romance way more than I did when I was younger. Half because my parents didn't let me, and
Yeah.
then half because, as I got older, I was just like, I can't read the 16-year-old no matter what she's doing. I don't care if she's on a pirate ship. I just didn't want to read her.
Right.
Like, it's just like, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with some adult reading a YA fantasy at all.
Yeah.
But just as much as I feel like if you read YA fantasy and you can still connect to a 16-year-old, there should be something wrong with that, then you shouldn't turn it around and make me feel bad about wanting to read.
Yeah.
I saw Brittany mention up on one of the comments about a new adult. Then you shouldn't be mad that I want to read a college romance and new adult. I love college romances. I'm in college. This
Yes.
is literally my life right now.
Can we also talk about how no one acknowledges new adult as a thing? Like, I don't understand this. I'm just like,
It's because all the new adult is mainly romance.
but it's like completely bypassed and disregarded. Like, I remember seeing those tweets you sent me of YA readers being like, oh, I wish there was a genre in between YA and adult. And I'm just like, new adult, anybody? Like, this genre exists. It's there. It's booming. It's extremely popular. And yes, it is primarily a romance, like, heavy genre, but there are also new adult fantasies. There are also new adult science fiction books out there, new adult, even historical books. You just have to find them. New adult is not necessarily about them being, people. It started off as college, right? It started off as that gray area between young adult, which is mostly high school aged characters, and adult, which obviously adult characters with careers and such. New adult happened because all these college romances started coming out, and so that's what they called it, because it's that in between. But now new adult has evolved into being an age bracket, so it's that 19ish, 20ish to like about 24, 23, 24 even. It's that weird middle area. Now it's more about like the age of the characters versus whether they're in college or not, because obviously the genre has just grown. But I just found that to be strange. I was like, okay, so you just once again, highlighting how romance is disregarded and how romance readers are ignored in large part, either ignored or ridiculed. And I just don't understand. I will never get it. I just don't get it. And I feel like now, because more and more booktubers, especially those who have larger followings, are willing to admit that they read romance and are willing to feature certain books that have romance heavy plots on their channels and in their reviews and their wrap-ups, we're now getting more and more people either A, admitting that they like romance and read it too, or B, actually more willing to pick up a romance. Whereas before they may have shunned the genre because of the stigma and because of the people who are, ashamed of it, or whatever, the negative connotations of it. Now we have more and more people that are like, oh, I'm new to romance. I just started reading romance last year, or I just picked up a romance this year. And it was because so-and-so recommended this book on their channel, and I love their videos, and we have similar reading tastes, and they liked it, so I decided to pick it up. So I'm seeing more and more of that happening.
I want to answer this question. It says, what's the difference between new adult and regular romance? New adult essentially just refers to the age of the main character. So if the main character is within the ages of new adult, which is typically college years, then that would qualify it as new adult. So if in retrospect, new adult doesn't have to just be romance. If a character in a fantasy or a sci-fi novel are then 23, then that's new adult because it's just age demographic, just like YA are typically 15 to 18-year-olds.
Well, it's why Sarah J. Maas's other series, not Throne of Glass, the other one, Court of Thorns and Roses, that is a new adult series. I don't know if you guys knew that, but that is considered a new adult series. Throne of Glass series is young adult. Court of Thorns and Roses, new adult, because of the age of the protagonists.
Yeah. And I think what confuses a lot of people, and I completely understand this, is that there are a lot of books in retrospect that will have characters that are within the YA age range, but have very heavy and more adult-like problems.
Yes.
And then that's where a lot of people get confused because, if there's a 16-year-old who's dealing with, things that in retrospect someone in their 30s or 40s would then deal with, then I can understand why some people, like, you even have authors that'll write a character be 17 and then say my story is not YA, but then it's like, well, it kind of is, because regardless of what your character is going through, your character's 16.
Yes.
So it's, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Your 16-year-old could literally have a full-time 9 to 5, and it doesn't matter if she is 16.
Exactly. So it is, I mean, I will say that new adult is like the foundation of new adult is those college romances. That is the foundation. But just like anything, it grows and it evolves, and it gets wings and it flies off the ground. And so now it's definitely exploded beyond just being a college romance thing. And now it's more about the age of the characters, because if you think about it, there is kind of that gray area in between being a young adult and being an adult, right? A 19 to 22-year-old is going to have a different thought process than a 25, 26, 27-year-old. There's a different maturity levels. There are different things that they're dealing with. And usually new adult is about that, like that weird time period where you're out of your parents' house, or at least you're trying to be, and you're trying to be on your own. You're trying to be on your own 2 feet. You're not quite there. You're kind of an adult, not really. So a lot of the themes and the plots surround those kind of like emotional things that the characters are going through, versus an adult book. It's just like you jump right in and they're like, so-and-so is a private investigator. You know what I mean? It's like full on into who they are. And okay, maybe they're not fully fleshed out, and they're on some type of hero's journey, but it's just a different vibe and feel to the books. New adult feels very coming of age, exploratory on a higher level than a young adult, but it's not quite adult. It's hard to explain unless you've read a lot of the books.
And I think that's why there's the conversation about having more fantasies be the new adult category, because new adult has this stigma to be nothing but college romances, period. Like, and granted, I will give it to you, like most new adults are people who are authors like, oh gosh, who wrote that one series, The Deal? I can't. Yeah, there we go. And then, Colleen Hoover writes new adult, and, a very big, and Lauren Lane, a lot of them write new adult, either they're in college or in their last year of college. So it's like teetering on them becoming full fleshed out adults.
Or they just got their first job and now they're, they just got their first apartment. And also, let's not be classist here. As we're talking, I'm starting to realize that a lot of urban, and you guys know, if you've been watching me for a long time, I freaking hate that label, but that is what these books are called. Urban fiction books, right? Which take place in some type of hood somewhere in America. And I call it street lit. That's what I would like to call it. I don't like urban fiction. I feel like whenever you slap urban on something, it automatically has a negative connotation to it, especially in America. So I like the terminology street lit, because a lot of these books are about lower income and lower socioeconomic class of people who are just trying to survive. You have a lot of like drug dealers, and most of the characters are Black, African American specifically. But anyways, I can go on and on. I'm starting to realize that most urban fiction books are new adult because of the age of the protagonists. And we don't want to be classist, because most of these books, they're not in college. Sometimes they're in school. Sometimes they're like, oh, I'm stripping to make it through school, or I started dating this drug dealer and now he's paying for my college, or I mean, these are the storylines, right? Or it's like, oh, now I'm, like, it's like, oh, I'm taking classes, or I'm trying to be a nurse, but it's never like on a college campus and you're in your dorm and the football player. It's not that. Or like, the hockey player takes interest in you, the bad boy of college. It's not that at all. Urban fiction, street lit, is a lot grittier. It's about people who are disenfranchised. Maybe he just got out of jail because he got caught with like a kilo. He's the plug, he's the connect, but the age, right? They're always 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, trying to figure out who they are, starting out in life. Maybe it's their first job. I'm like, oh, a lot of urban fiction books are new adult, but they're so heavily under that urban fiction brush. It's like people don't even think about it.
The Cerebral Hedonist asked, well, that was my confusion because you have a lot of 20 to 25-year-olds in fantasy and sci-fi, but I don't think you called them new adult content. You would not, because quite frankly, marketers and publishers kind of rule what is and is not those things. And so with new adult, the main themes tend to be of new adult are exploring your weird age of being in college. And because of a lot of fantasy novels, if a 23-year-old is then, casted into this fantasy world full of fairies, she don't got time to really find herself because she's battling all these demon fairies. So, it's really not new adult, but there is a lot of conversation amongst booktubers about there being more new adult fantasies, because a lot of times authors and publishers will either go, well, if you're 18 and younger, it's a YA fantasy period. Yeah. And then anything over 19, you're an adult. That's it.
I think that earlier Dee asked, like, does it get repetitive? Like, does new adult feel repetitive plot-wise because it's such a particular age? And I feel like the same can be said for YA, right? Like, you can ask, because YA is such a particular age, does it become repetitive? But then you think about all the different nuances that you could have in the story, and how if you take it outside of the box and the only commonality is the age bracket of the characters, you really do have a lot of room for imagination, a lot of things, especially with romance. And this is what people don't realize with romance. You could literally find any topic under the sun, and there is a romance novel. Do you like friends to lovers? Do you like enemies to lovers? Do you like sports romance? Do you like Vikings? Do you like time travel? Do you like historical? Do you like single moms, second chance romance, divorcee, older, widower? You know what I'm saying? Pirate. Like, you literally can think of anything. You could be like, I want to read a romance about a prehistoric cave beast man who finds, there is a romance for that.
There's a romance for it.
I want to read about a mermaid under the sea. There is a romance for that. I want to read about a monster who has wings in a planet far away and blah, 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 blah. Like, romance covers so much. It's not just one size fits all. And then you also have like the steam factor. Like, you have the sweeter romances that are more PG and doesn't go to a lot of sexually explicit detail. A lot of people like those. You even have like Christian romance and like Quaker romance, Mormon romance.
Oh, and then there's like pilgrim romances. There's Amish and stuff. Like, there's everything.
There's literally anything under the sun. Like, if you like it really raunchy, if you like more on the erotica side, if you like it if you don't really want to read about that, you just want the love. Like, it spans so much. It's insane. It's such a huge genre. It's so detailed.
And then for the argument of it being repetitive, I think, that can be for pretty much any genre regardless, because then, like you were saying, in YA, it can be pretty repetitive because I've read YA fantasy books that I'm just like, oh, this is kind of like the same thing. There's actually jokes on book Twitter where they'll like just hash out the formula to like every YA fantasy. And I'm just like, wow.
Yes.
It is like every single one of them.
There is a formula.
There is a formula to it. And, not saying that's a bad thing at all, because it works for them. There's nothing, like, there doesn't have to be a bad thing. But I think just as much as fantasy, sci-fi, or any other genre has lots of different aspects to it, so does romance. But if romance just really, really isn't your thing, there's really nothing wrong with that. But then there's something to be said about you if it's not your thing, and then you proceed to make someone feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Because just as much as I, like, what's something I'm not, okay, the trope, I will just know for me, like, all the way around, I will not read it. I don't care how good someone tells me the romance is. I refuse to read tropes where a girl is like falling in love with like her dad's best friend, who like basically helped raise her. I just will not read it. I don't care. I don't care how many people tell me this book is good. I just don't care. I will read it. But I also don't go and be like, ew, you read that? You like that? Really? Like the closest I've gotten to that was Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas, and only because she did not know the main guy.
You didn't. I really liked that read.
Huh?
I really liked that read.
I really liked that book, but she didn't know him. It wasn't like it was her dad's best friend who raised her.
It was just her boyfriend's dad.
I mean, yeah, it was still terrible, but but I'm
Lord.
like, like he didn't, help raise her or nothing to then like make her into what he wanted. I want,
Right.
but if someone then goes and wants to read it, heck, I don't really side eye people when they read 17-year-olds having sex with 40-year-olds. I really don't care. Like it's whatever you want to read. Like it's really not that deep to me. Like as long as
There's a lot of
weirdo in real life.
a lot of the historicals have like 17, 18-year-olds being married off and going on to have sexual relations with 40, 30-year-olds, because that's the way society was back then. So if it's something set up like, oh, this was a societal setup, like this is Regency England, like this is what it was, like the debutantes, you debut at 15, 16, 17, 18. If you're still debuting at 19, 20, you're an old maiden on the shelf. Your parents are trying to marry you off by 17, 18 years old. And do they want to marry you off to? The Duke, who's in his 30s or 40s, because boys will be boys and they don't want to settle down too young. You know what I'm saying? So if that's the setup and this is the world and these are the social norms, I'm not going to be icked out. But I'm not going to lie, I'm going to feel very uncomfortable reading a 17-year-old or even 18-year-old hooking up with a 40, 50-year-old in contemporary, like non-fantasy. Like, that's weird. I really don't like parent to teacher either, like parent teacher romances, because that's an imbalance of power. That makes me very uncomfortable.
Wait, parent teacher or teacher student?
Oh, not parent teacher. I'm so sorry.
Teacher student.
Teacher student. That's what I meant. That makes me uncomfortable. I don't like. What is the other one I don't like? Oh, stepbrother.
There's so many of them.
Stepbrother, stepsister. I don't understand it, especially if it's like, oh, we grew up in the same house and I've always had a crush on them. I'm like,
but you grew up as siblings.
Brother.
Like I understand when it's like they're both old and they're married at like and they're like 17. I understand. Yes. But then it's never that. It's always that they grew up together. And I'm just like, but he's your brother.
Anything that suggests grooming, like you said, oh, my dad's best friend, or that creeps me out. So there are a lot of hard limits for me, but at the same time, I don't mind. Like I really like erotica. Some things are like weird, but for the most part, I really like BDSM type books, which is why 50 Shades of Grey to me was just so cringeworthy. By the way, if anybody wants a good suggestion for what 50 Shades of Grey should have been, I've got you. I've got like 2 series that are like some of my favorites.
The problem with 50 Shades of Grey is that it reminded me too much of Twilight. Like it was just
too much Twilight. It's Twilight fan fiction. So
yeah, I know. That's why I couldn't. It was so crazy to me that it was so similar.
Just like those after books by Anna Todd are basically like One Direction fan.
One Direction. I actually read it when it was like originally being put out
on Wattpad.
Yeah, I was super into One Direction when I was younger.
But yeah, so I don't even remember how we got off on this tangent. I guess we started talking about new adult and we just kind of spiraled. But where are we going with this? I'm like losing my train of thought.
Can we talk about something that I want to talk about recently? Because I know you've read this book, so I wanted to talk about it.
Yes.
You read Punk 57, right?
Wait, did I?
By Penelope Douglas?
I don't think I did.
No, you didn't read that one?
No.
Okay. Well, basically, the premise of it are these 2 high school kids. They're in like their last year of high school, and they've been pen pals for like their 4th grade year of elementary school. And they only live literally like a town apart. And he accidentally meets her and realizes he hates her. And so he has to kind of like deal with the fact that this person he pretty much fell in love with his whole life is like this horrible person, right?
Okay.
And so I loved it. I thought it was amazing. I love Penelope Douglas. And this is what I want to talk about in it.
Okay.
Why does all of these social justice warriors think that high schoolers don't have sex? Like, so many people super dislike when in YA romances they have sex. And I'm just
I
like,
do.
well, dang, people in my middle school were having sex. So I don't know if it's really that far-fetched that people in you might have not had sex in high school, but that doesn't mean no one on earth has sex in high school. In retrospect, plenty of people do.
You know, it's that Madonna horror complex thing. It's the reason why so many people like their female protagonists to be virgins and untouched. It all goes under the same umbrella. I always found that to be super cringeworthy, even when I was growing up reading. I mean, when I was a teenager, we didn't have young adult. We just had like Sarah Dessen and like these authors, but it wasn't categorized as young adult, even though that's what it was.
What it was, yeah.
And I always remember being very frustrated by the fact that all these protagonists were so untouched and pure and inexperienced and like naive in that sense, because I had friends who were experimenting sexually and who were having sex, whether with their boyfriends or whoever. I mean, I knew people. So to me, it always just seemed very disingenuous and unrealistic. So I did not appreciate that every single book that I picked up about a high school girl. And so I realizing though that is a morality thing as well, because parents seem to be a little bit more involved in what their kids were reading. I mean, I'm sure parents are still pretty involved in what their kids are reading. So it's like that place of like morality and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable for different age groups. And now, because of the age of the internet and because of things like Kindles and ebooks, parents don't have as much of a watchful eye on what their kids are reading. And authors are taking more risks. So like I like what would I guess be considered like dark high school romances. Like one of my favorite authors of all time, I really enjoy her books. She writes like very angsty, very dark high school romances where people are definitely having sex, but they're also like beating the shit out of people and like plotting like the domination of their high schools and shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I'm an adult now. So I don't know how I would feel about like a 15, 16-year-old reading that, even though that frustrated me as a 15, 16-year-old that all of these books were so like vanilla.
I think there's like a way to go about it, because there's nothing wrong with having a book where a teenager, if it's a romance book particularly, teenagers have their first time together, and it's just, just that. It's not that there's this toxic, crazy relationship that has to be apparent. Like, there's a difference between, for instance, if you're reading an adult romance and they have sex in it, then it'll probably be different than a YA couple who have never had sex before try it out for the first time. Because I think there's always something dangerous about not showing kids what ideal and non-toxic relationships are in books, because then it's really unrealistic to then write only stories of YA where kids are like not experiencing anything. Like, of course, there are kids that don't do those things, like I didn't, but there are people who do, and it doesn't have to be in toxic ways.
Exactly. And I also feel like the girls who are portrayed as having sex in these books are always like
hoes,
slutty hoes, the mean girl. Oh, because it's always like the female protagonist is that like, oh, well, I'm not like other girls type of girl. And she, all those tropes, like she's beautiful, but she doesn't know it. The hottest guy in school has a crush on her, but she has no clue. She's like the nerd with the glasses, or like she's the quiet girl. She's shy. She doesn't wear makeup. She has brown hair and pale skin. Like they're all these like very, very repetitive tropes that just keep repeating themselves over and over. And 9 times out of 10, she's a virgin, or she like almost had sex one time, but like she was being attacked and she ran away. Like it's always something so traumatic, or it's
very traumatic,
or it's like no experience whatsoever, right? And then it's like the girl who is experienced, she's the whore of the school. She slept with the whole football team. Everybody's talking about her. She's mean, and she's mean to the female protagonist, and she's like the popular girl. She's fake. She's really pretty. She's fake. So to me, that's toxic.
Yeah, very.
So I find it very interesting that on book Twitter, especially, you have a lot of these primarily YA readers who complain if there is like sex in the book, or any type of sexuality displayed in the book when they typically read books like that have all of those toxic things that I just explained. And I'm just like, what's
Yeah. It's like in the series I do on my channel where I either talk about things I hate in my favorite books or talk about things I like in my least favorite books. I talk about Fangirl and how I completely disliked, the one thing I did dislike about Fangirl was the portrayal of her sister, and how her sister was just this awful human being because she didn't want to be connected to her side and that she wanted to go out and party. And it was like this undercurrent that, and by the end of the book, oh, that's a spoiler, but you've read Fangirl, you know what happens to her sister in the book. It's kind of like a whole 180.
Yes.
And it kind of makes it seem like if you go to college, you have to be in your room, you have to stay on your computer, you can't go out and have fun. There's a way to balance them both. You can go out and party, you can go out and have fun, you can go out and have sex if you want to. If you don't want to, it's not that big of a deal. But there's never like this balance of it. Why does she have to be a slut? Because, okay, what if she did bang 5 guys in one night? That's her prerogative. If it was consensual, then there shouldn't be a problem.
Like, and that's initially what drew me to the new adult genre so heavily when I first started reading it back in 2011, was that finally authors were exploring that, right? Like YA seemed very, very, very restricted. Like, oh, you have this virgin girl who this hot guy likes, and the mean girl is the slutty girl, like all these tropes. Like new adult was like exploring new horizons. Like the female protagonist 9 times out of 10 isn't a virgin. Like she's living her best life in college, or maybe she's going through something hard. Maybe she goes to a party and it's like completely normalized. You know what I'm saying? Maybe she's in a relationship at the beginning of the book that ends up falling apart. Like there isn't this fake purity going on and this moralistic bullshit going on, right? She's a normal girl trying to find her way. And her sexual experience doesn't make or break her, or is not a character trait. Like it's just a part of who she is naturally. So that's what initially drew me to new adult books. I remember like one of the new adults that I read, one of the beginning ones, I guess, when I first started reading new adults, the opening chapter of the book was a girl doing a walk of shame from a frat house. And she was the female protagonist.
Oh.
Yes. And she was kind of known at school as being like this really beautiful, but like hard as nails girl who did not do relationships and only hooked up. And like the different guys that she was hooking up with kept trying to get her to get into a relationship with them. And she was like, no.
I like that switch up of dynamics. I like that.
The opening chapter was literally like her walking out of the frat house doing a walk of shame. And on the lawn, as she's like trying to pull herself together, she meets the male protagonist and he strikes up a conversation with her and he knows exactly what she's just been doing. But he's like, they have this like little witty moment and he's just like, I like her. And she like goes about her day. And I'm just like, thank you.
Right? I love when they switch up the power dynamics like that.
Exactly. So, but the way it was written, it wasn't with all those toxic undertones, like she's slutty or no, it was just literally like, it is what it is. And it wasn't, the story wasn't about that. The story was more about her emotional journey of learning to value sexual intimacy in an emotional sense. Because for her, sex was just a physical thing. She wasn't interested in relationships. So the story was about her emotional journey to truly like healing and opening her heart up to like actually loving somebody. So
I wanted to point this comment out from the Cerebral Hedonist because I mentioned this one time on YouTube and a lot of people, I don't know, maybe I'm 24. I don't think that's that old, but maybe we just come from 2 different generations. But the comment said, I didn't have YA or NA. We have middle grade, then adult.
Yes.
I literally, in a video, commented on how when I was younger, there was no difference in it. It was like you knew that you were reading middle grade and then you flipped over and it was adult. That was it. Yes. I didn't know what YA was literally until I got to high school and got onto social media when it started becoming a bigger thing. But a lot of people were just like, well, when I was a kid, I knew it was YA. And I'm just like, yeah, but you're also like 17. So I'm 24. So we had two different experiences as a child. And when I was young, it was just like, you know, if you go into Barnes and Noble, there was the kids section.
Yes.
And my mom wouldn't let me leave there. I had to stay
Yes.
there. I couldn't go out of it at all because most of the time back then they had the teen books within those. So it was like this side was like pre-K kids and kindergartners, and then this side you got to the teen books.
Yes.
And then after that, everything outside of Barnes and Noble were just like you were going into adult books.
Yeah, the young adult genre came about with Twilight. Before Twilight, there were authors writing books that could technically be categorized as young adult, but the publishers did not create that huge push for those type of books until the Twilight craze hit. Like I said, there are the OGs of young adult, and we call them the OGs of young adult because they were writing young adult before we even had a name for it. And I remember growing up, it was literally like a handful of authors, and I know I keep mentioning Sarah Dessen, but she's the one that stands out to me the most.
Same.
Right? So it was a very, very, very small pool of authors.
Yeah.
Like a handful, because you literally went from like Judy Blume type books, which were a little bit more serious, a little bit more in depth, to like that weird middle grade gray area where it was like half of the middle grade books were literally like depressing as fuck, like Bridge to Terabithia and
oh
like
my God, so depressing.
Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, like, you know what I'm saying? Like Where the Red Fern Grows. Like you have like the super depressing ones, and then you have like the interesting ones, like the Judy Blume books, and you know, A Wrinkle in Time. Like it was very weird. Like it was a very weird, murky area. And then you had like the small pool of people writing young adult, even though it was called young adult, and then it was just straight on to adult. And so that's why growing up, I literally went from reading kids books to reading adult. Like there was no young adult genre. So when the young adult genre thing became a thing, which really happened with Twilight, the Twilight craze, and then all these copycatters coming after Twilight and the paranormal genre really taking off, that was when I was in college. And so I was discovering young adult in college and in my adult years, because that's when it finally became, because I remember it was like Twilight, and then after Twilight, like Cassandra Clare tried to piggyback off of that and came out with her books, which I could never get into. And then there were a whole bunch of other like Twilight copycatters, and then that spun off into like the whole dystopian craze with the Hunger Games and Divergent. And then it just exploded. And I feel like people do not realize that. And especially people who are 17, 18, 19, 20, young adult existed for you because you were that age at that time. But for people who were that age and it didn't exist, we remember. Like,
yeah.
Like, no, I didn't.
Like me and my older sister, my sister is about 4 years older than me, so she's about 28 right now. My mom used to take us to the library and Barnes and Noble all the time. And I had called something YA, and she was like, "What is that?" And I was just like, "It means young adult." And she was just like, "What is that? Like an age?" And I was just like, "Yeah, it's like an age demographic for books. They like separated all in Barnes and Noble now." And she was like, because she hadn't gone to Barnes and Noble in forever. And she was like, "Really?" And I was just like, "Yeah, girl, like they categorize it by ages now," which, you know, is a good thing and a bad thing. But I think, you know, it's like a lot about marketing. So they know that they market towards this demographic with these themes, with all this stuff, then that's how they make that money. Because regardless of if these kids are doing something that normal high school age kids do, you're still 16. And like, well, that's why you have a lot of authors on social media get very heated about their stories being put in YA sections, even though they're not YA.
Right.
Well, you also have a, 16-year-old character. So your marketing team was like, well, she's 16. We want all these little kids to read your book because that's who's going to spend the most money. So they're going to market it as YA regardless. That there are books that I read in romance genres, I'm like, this is not YA. Why is this like, this is really some heavy stuff to be a YA. Wait, what do your favorite books have more in common? Genre, plot, types, or other details like types of characters or the way the author writes?
I feel like a lot of my favorite books, it has the writing, you know, like I feel like there's a difference between being a good storyteller and being a good writer. And I think you can definitely be both. And I gravitate towards books where the storytelling and the writing are both really great. And I always feel like I connect with characters. So if I can really connect with the main protagonist, whether it be a man or a woman, or however they identify, then that makes me love the story even more. But all of my favorite books are so random. Like that's really the only connecting thread. You know what I'm saying? Like when I think about all my favorite books, there's nothing that's like, well, all my favorite books are the same in this way, or all my favorite books. It's mostly just like great storytelling with coupled with good writing, with dynamic characters that I can root for and that I feel like I really care about these characters and I really want to see where their journey goes. But I tend to like break up my favorite books because I have like my favorite romance books, and then I have my favorite like historical books. I have my favorite classics. I have my favorite I don't really read sci-fi like that. My favorite fantasy novels. And I mean, I definitely enjoy books more if they have a romance plot. If a book doesn't have a romance plot whatsoever, it's very rare that I'm interested to continue reading it. Just like
Same. I'm like that too. I will read stuff that doesn't have romances in it sometimes, but a lot of times there's typically a side plot. I think the most I get out of romance is when I read nonfiction. But
yeah. I want either like a romance or some type of strong relationship, whether it be a familiar relationship or a friendship. Like there needs to be some type of strong human bond or connection in the book for it to captivate me. Otherwise, I'm just like bored.
for me, as far as things in common, I'll have to agree that they're kind of erratic. Like, I think recently for the channel series I do, where I recommend 5 of each trope, I think that's as close to similar things that I've gotten, where I'll actually like have recommendations per trope. Like, I might do enemies to lovers or friends to lovers, or, you know, a billionaire or something like that. But as far as things that they have in common, I think honestly, as far as romances go, it's erratic. But I think in fantasy, I do have a very specific things I like. Like, I like fairy fantasies. I like retellings.
Yeah.
But as far as anything else, I don't think so. I feel like I have very chaotic reading taste.
Hold on, let me put these dogs up because they out here sitting up.
I'm gonna read some more of these questions. Um, yeah, I agree that it does help limit parents with children, because my mom like tried her best to limit to what I read, but was out there being like, you know, if I stepped out of the area where all the kids stuff was, there really wasn't anything she could do if I wasn't with her. But if, you know, if you're with them and you're in the teen section and your kid's like 10 years old, then you could stop them from, you know, reading something that would mess up their brain too young.
Harley brought up a good point where she said that I like romance plots, but unless it's romance, I don't like when it becomes a priority. And I almost kind of agree with that because there's nothing more frustrating than reading, you know, a dystopian or a book where there are high stakes, where like people's lives are at stake or they're in danger. And it's like, I know that we're about to go into battle, but why don't you like me back? Like, I'm just like, okay, so when you're about to die, you're not going to be concerned about whether he likes you back or not, or why you saw him kissing the maid or kissing this other girl or boy or whatever. Like, you kind of need to focus on surviving right now.
Surviving.
Like, y'all are about to die. Like, you know what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
like, it's this high stakes, like fantasy world, and like things are really happening, and you're over here crying because so and so doesn't like you, or so and so broke your heart. Like, I'm just like, no, I don't believe this. I don't think this is believable.
Right. And I think also, like, for instance, I recently read Fix Her Up and I really, really liked it. I know a lot of people didn't like it because a lot of people don't like the term baby girl being used. But I did honestly like it. I have no idea. A lot of people dislike it though. Anyone that I've seen dislike it, don't like the term baby girl. I honestly.
Brittany just got
Brittany is about to start. but in it, the basis of it, one thing I didn't like about it was it kind of really only was plotted around their romance, and there was really nothing else going on about it. And I was just like, as cute as this book is, I could understand people were saying it was just so and so, because while there was technically a plot, it was like backburnered. It wasn't, really important in retrospect. Like, it was fake dating, and so they had the reason to fake date, but it was like their reason for fake dating was like, I don't want to give anything away, so I'm trying not to,
I don't care. I'm not going to read the book.
Well, I don't know about anybody else. But that was one of my problems with it, because it was like so romance based. And I think the problem with that is that if there's not something else going on, it does lead to you getting bored.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, I read one today I just finished, and it was, the basis of it was about this girl's insecurity with her body, and she fell in love with this guy in this country town. But the main plot point of it, I didn't particularly like the book, but the main plot point was her dealing with her body image issues. So I feel like when you do have a plot and there is romance in it, that, is better than, just making me sit there and just making out every scene. I don't want to read that. I would just read erotica if I just wanted to read that.
Exactly. I think there's definitely a way to write a story where it feels organic and it doesn't feel too corny or too one-sided, but also you're able to fully flesh out these characters outside of this connection that they have with each other. Mm-hmm. And there are other things going on in the story. It actually makes the story more interesting. But if it's just page after page and chapter after chapter of these two people being all up in each other's faces, it gets really, really boring and very unrealistic, because you're just like, okay, well, what are they doing when they're not together? Oh, they're always together. Okay, I'm bored.
Yeah. There needs to be some separation of the romance, give me a little bit of angst. They don't got to be like this all day long.
No.
Sorry, I hate Brittany. Can we kick her out of this live? She said, if you could pick only one romance trope for the rest of your life, which would it be?
That's
Brittany, I'm not recommending you any romance novel. That is too much pressure.
That's a lot of pressure. I have my moods. It depends on what I'm in the mood for, because I have probably read more street lit in the past 2 years than in my entire life. Like, before these past 2 years, I read street lit mostly when I was in high school, like for a very short period of time in high school, because Zane was very popular. The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah was like the book. To this day, that book is like legendary status. And so many of like Black girls around my age, we all read that book. Like, that was like the book. And like Omar Tyree and other certain authors were really popular. So but I'm just like in the mood for street lit right now.
I'm definitely a mood reader as well.
Yeah, but then I get in the mood for like friends to lovers or like pirates or like historical. Like, it's hard to pick one for the rest of my life. That's why I love romance so much, is that you don't have to pick.
I'd turn into a romance hater if I had to choose one the rest of my life.
Yes, you would get bored.
I would get so bored.
Reading a sports romance. And then tomorrow I might want to read a mafia romance or interracial, or I don't know.
Like, for the fact, I have not posted a recommendations video in like a month or two. And it is because I was making myself read like 6 straight romance novels with a virgin heroine. 6 straight novels.
I don't know how you did it.
Billionaire. 6 straight, and then I'd be like, okay, I have to give myself a break. I cannot do this. It's too much. I was beginning to hate certain things. Like, today I read one with, like I said, a girl who had insecurities, and she was like a cowboy type book, right? And tomorrow I need to finish reading Get a Life, Chloe Brown.
Yeah,
so just like it's I couldn't just pick one trope.
Yeah.
I would love to sit here and say I could read Friends to Lovers forever, but I'm sure even that would annoy me.
Yeah. And also, I feel like that's why it's so hard for me on my channel, because I see people, like I know someone mentioned earlier in the live how fast Chandler Ainsley's channel grew in such a short period of time. And it's because she does make those type of videos and people are interested. Like she'll make like top 5 dark romances or top 5 this or top 5. And I just can't, like, it's very hard for me to dictate my reading around BookTube. Like BookTube for me is very much, in a lot of ways, an afterthought. Like I love sharing books on here and I love talking about books that I love. But at the same time, I'm not the type of person that's going to force myself to read 6 this or 7 this, or I can't do it. And so for me, it's hard to make those type of videos because I just can't bring myself to. I did that in the beginning. When I first started my channel, I dictated a lot of my reading around BookTube. And I found out very quickly that it's not sustainable, at least not for me. A lot of people are able to do it and they're able to treat it more of like a business, in a business sense, and they're able to grow their channels and, you know, really take off and stuff like that. And that's great. But for me, like if I started to dictate BookTube, or if I started to dictate my reading around BookTube, I think I would quickly start to hate BookTube.
I started hating reading, but I think for me, I was very like dedicated to the recommendations at first, but then it kind of got fizzled out because I was just like, I cannot sit here. And I think the last time I let my subscribers and followers choose the trope, I think it was billionaire romances, and I was just like, I'm gonna have to put this on the back burner. Listen, and this is how you know I'm a mood reader. My brother in September texted me what I wanted for my birthday, and whatever book I wanted, he would buy it for me. I love Helen Huang. I asked him to buy me this book in September. He bought me the book. I have still not read it. And I haven't told him that.
I'm the same way. I mean, have you ever thought about just looking back? I don't know how you record or keep track of the books that you read. I know a lot of people use Goodreads, but have you ever thought about looking on your Goodreads shelf and see like all of the romances you've read and then find like similarities and then make a video that way because you've already read those books and now you don't have to force yourself to read? Does that make sense?
Yes, but I only have like 80 books on my Goodreads, so okay. It works for me. Literally, I always tell people, don't judge how much I read by Goodreads because I will never, I swear on my life, I will never sit down and go from, especially because I've been reading for so long, like I've been reading since I was really young. I cannot sit there and remember all the books I've read. That's why I have to, you know, go ahead and just read some and then give recommendations. But you know, it's not too bad. I've done I think about 4 or 5 of the videos, and as long as I don't have school, like that's part of the reason I haven't done one in a minute is because I have school and I just cannot sit for 3 days and read 6 books. Like I just can't. So what if he's watching this stream? My brother doesn't know I have a BookTube, and even if he did, he would not sit through the stream. No, never.
I've been on a interracial romance kick. Like I probably read 2 or 3 in the past week or so. And I read one yesterday, between yesterday and today, and I still don't know how I feel.
You know how I feel about interracial romances. I offended some people on Twitter when I said something about it a month ago. And I wasn't being mean either. I was just stating that I don't like interracial romances where the main character is Black and the entire plot is based on the fact that she is Black.
Honey, and you are going to love the premise of this book that I just read.
Oh, no.
So, I still don't know how I feel about this. I'm like, I don't know how I feel.
Which one is it?
The author did say that it was more controversial and like people who were sensitive shouldn't read it. Okay, so the name of the book is called Trent. Hold on, let me see. I'm literally pulling it up right now because I need to talk to somebody about this. So, the book is called Trent, and it's an Across the Aisle series. The series is called Across the Aisle, and this is book 1. It's called Trent. Obviously, our main male protagonist, his name is Trent. The premise of the book is the female protagonist, whose name is Bernadette, and as you can guess, she is a dark-skinned Black woman, is an escort. And she's an escort because she has to pay for law school. She cannot afford law school without being an escort. She has this stereotypical struggle background where her mom was a crackhead and she was raised by her grandmother in the hood in DC.
Oh,
which is now extremely gentrified as heck. And she works as an escort, right? But okay, so this escorting agency has two sides. It has the women who are plainly just escorts and they just escort these wealthy men out or women out to events. And then you have the women who are also having sex with their clients. Mm-hmm. So she decides that she's going to cross over and start having sex with the client, a client. She's only going to pick one client because you get paid more. And she just got her bill for like the semester. And she's like, oh, I got to pay this bill. So she decides she's going to cross over. Her first client is a white male.
Of course.
Who's in his late 40s, early 50s. And when she goes to meet him, he literally is a white supremacist. And he makes comments, like he keeps calling her sister. And like he keeps saying, oh, you're sassy. Oh, you're this. And she slaps him and she tries to leave, but he won't let her leave. So it has that like aggressive component. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, the way he's treating her turns her on. And they're just having like the best sex ever, even though she hates him. Wait, but isn't it white supremacist? Oh, it gets worse. It gets worse. She finds out that he is a top senator from Louisiana for the Republican Party. Yo. And he only sleeps with Black women escorts and nobody knows about it. And he fetishizes Black women because it gets worse, Troy. It gets worse. Because when he was 14 years old, he fell in love with the little Black girl. And let me finish. He fell in love with the little Black girl. And they were so cute together. She was so smart and well-spoken. And he invited her over to his house. He comes from old money and decided they were going to lose their virginities together. But then his dad interrupts them while they're in the act and is like, what are you doing with that colored girl? And he's like, ready.
Was this said in the 40s?
Well, he's like 50 years old. So this is probably like, I don't know, dude.
Oh my God.
This is in Louisiana. Keep that in mind. So his dad is like, what are you doing with this colored girl? And he's ready to risk it all. And he's like, I love her. I'm in love with her. And she goes, no, we're just experimenting. I'm just an experiment. I don't love him. And she abandons him. From that moment on, he hates all Black women.
Dear God.
I'm literally reading.
You may never, ever recommend me a book ever.
I'm literally reading this book. I'm just like trying to make sense of it all. How did I get here? And this is the problem I have with interracial romance.
Yo, oh my gosh.
The best part is he falls in love with her. She ends up falling in love with him. Keep in mind, he's still a white supremacist. And, Troy, you're going to love this. He doesn't realize her plight as a Black woman until he invites her over to his house and her hair gets wet in the shower after they finish having sex. And he's like, your hair looks crazy. You need to do something with it. And she goes, oh. And she goes, I don't have any hair products. He's like, oh, let me go out and get you some hair products. And he comes back an hour later and he's like, there are literally no Black hair care products around here. I had to go all the way like deeper into like Maryland to find them. I had to go to the hood basically. He goes, this is a big issue. Black hair matters. And she's like, okay, so Black lives don't matter, but Black hair does.
Oh, Shirley, what the fuck is this?
I need somebody else to read this.
Wait, is the author Black or white?
I'm scared to find out.
I don't want to know either. Don't even tell me.
I just had to keep reading because I was like, I need to know what's happening. At the end.
Wait, everyone in the comments is asking. I'm asking, who the heck wrote this?
Her name, I'm literally crying. Her name is, the author is, God, what is her name? It's like Zyla. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Zyla Turner.
So she is black.
She's probably black.
She's black.
I mean, she did have a warning in the beginning of the book.
Oh my dear Lord.
This book is different. And I'm reading it. I'm like, this is.
See, I was just having little problems with interracial romances. You got a lot of problem over there. What's going on in South Carolina?
I feel, well, North Carolina. I feel like there is a fine line, because whenever you start getting into fetishization, whenever you start getting into like slave romances, which exist.
Yeah.
I'm just like.
Nazi romances exist.
I can't. Like, this is where I have issues with interracial romance, is when they try to paint like some type of like picturesque brush over like systemic racism and like really deep underlying issues like this life. But it's okay, because at the end, because he's dating a black woman, he becomes a Democratic senator. He changed.
Dear Lord, help me.
I was like, okay with
that? That's a good question, Emma. Is it satire? Is that what it's supposed to be?
No.
Oh no.
No, it's not. I was like, the whole time I was reading the book, I was like, I really want to stop reading this book, but I need to know how.
I need to know how it is. Like, how did she try to make this up? I was hoping you told me she stabbed him at the end, but that did not happen.
That was the part that upset me, is that she resisted so much in the beginning. And then he did that thing where he was like, well, I'm going to pay like an extravagant amount of money for you to continue to be my escort and continue to sleep with me. Like, I'm going to overcompensate you because I know that you need this money, even though you hate me and you feel like I'm racist. Oh, and this just reminded me of how like racist white people hate to be called out on their racism, because the first time they met, she calls him a racist bigot and he has this whole meltdown. And it's like, I'm not racist. How could you say this? Like, I'm just like,
what do you mean?
What do you mean? Like, I can't believe you called me racist. I'm like, but you are. Look, I'm confused.
Lord have mercy.
Woo, honey. I can't.
And see, I was just gonna say,
I just had to talk to someone about this book, because I was just like, this book is this, and I need to talk about it.
But I was actually going to say, my problem with a lot of interracial romances aren't typically when Black people write them. It's a lot of times when I read ones, because here's my thing. I don't particularly go into interracial romances, particularly trying to read them, or like because I have a preference for them reading.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll read one that's written by a white woman. And a lot of times there's always a part in these books, especially if a character has natural hair.
Oh no.
That they try to make it seem like the main guy, who's typically a white guy, reading a label and being like, do you want shea moisture? Thank God it's natural. And I'm just like, you read a label? Like, I don't care.
What?
I'm so serious. Like, that happens a lot. And I'm just like, okay, this is not the petting zoo. We're not like...
I think that's the issue, is that interracial romances that point out more of the differences that we as human beings have with each other, like that harp on the differences, focus on the differences, like things like our hair, basically treating us like we're some type of strange exotic creatures from outer space or something. That is very disappointing to me, and troubling, because really even like the whole interracial romance genre is literally only called interracial because it's about two people from different races falling in love. And okay, so maybe there are some societal issues that they face because of the type of society that we live in, where racism is still rampant and people are unfamiliar with what's different from them. I don't mind those aspects in the story. It bothers me when it crosses over to the couple's relationship in such a way that highlights, like I said, their differences more than their similarities, or gives me like that fetishization type of like icky feeling where I'm just like, ooh, no, I don't like it. Like that's when things get weird. Or if, you know, the characters always make it a point to like point out the other character's race. I read a street lit interracial romance last week or the week before last week. I can't remember. I think it was last week. And it was basically about this white guy who grew up in the hood simply because once again, this is all about like lower socioeconomic and disenfranchised people, but his parents were basically like trailer trash, white trailer trash. They were on drugs, like meth really bad. And he was crying. He's a baby and he just would not stop crying. And his parents didn't know what to do. And so they literally drove him into the middle of a Black neighborhood and threw him in the dumpster. And they said that they were going to get away with it because it was, quote unquote, an N-word neighborhood and the cops don't come out there anyway. So if they throw their baby away, nobody's going to find out or care. So they threw him in the trash. Flip side, you have a young Black couple who's expecting their first child, and it's a boy, and they're super excited. They're married. They may live in the hood, but they're married. They're in love. They're expecting their first baby. They're very excited. Well, the baby ends up dying. Like she has a stillbirth, and they're just devastated. Well, the mom is still recovering from the stillbirth. She hears this baby crying. She thinks she's going crazy. She goes outside and she finds a little white baby in the trash, brings him inside, and decides to raise him as her son. Wait, hold on. You're cutting in and out. Hold on. Wait, you're frozen.
You were cutting in and out too, sis. You're frozen.
Hold on. Okay, I think we're back. I just had to make sure. I don't know what part people missed or what part people caught.
I don't know, but I think both of our screens, it must have been yours because my screen went out and your screen went out.
Yikes. Okay, what was the last part that y'all heard? Somebody put it in the chat.
Brittany said, what the absolute hell do you read, man?
I find some interesting books.
Brittany, whatever you do, don't take any recommendations from Oshale.
I have some great recommendations. I just get very curious and I always like to like branch out. But I don't remember what the last part that you guys read, but long story short. Okay, so yeah, she finds a baby in the trash, the white baby, takes him in and raises him as her own, along with her husband. And so the whole interracial romance plot comes in when the Black female protagonist in the story, the little white boy obviously grows up. He's an adult, but he's like, and I repeat, as they say in the story, a Black man in a white man's body.
Oh my.
I didn't like that at all, but that's how
no.
A white guy being raised in the hood or whatever. I don't know, dude. A lot of white people are being raised in the hood. It doesn't make them Black people and white people's bodies. White people being raised in the hood. Just like Hispanic people raised in the hood. Any other culture or nationality, that doesn't make them Black.
You know what that reminds me of? Do you watch The Housewives of Potomac?
No.
My mom watches it, and there's this Black girl on there, and she has a white husband, and she says, this is so terrible. She said her husband's a white man with a Black man's. And everyone was just sitting there like, why would you say that?
But see, this is the type of fetishy stuff that makes me uncomfortable. Like comments like that, and like in this book that I was talking about, like the male protagonist made it a point to like say he only dates Black women because that's what he was raised around. That's what his mom is. And that's just who he feels more comfortable with. It's like, okay. But then the female protagonist was like not wanting to date him because he was white. And then when she finally gave him and started dating him, she's like, oh, he's basically just Black. I was like, no.
No, he just grew up in the hood.
So these are the type of issues that I have when it comes to interracial romance. Like, there are just so many landmines and pitfalls in interracial romance that makes it like a hit or miss genre for me.
Mm-hmm.
Very hit or miss. Coco Chanel says those books are triggering and not what I look for in romance. Black families raise white child from dumpster. Sounds like a headline.
It does sound like a headline.
Oh God.
A headline that does not even like remotely appeal to me.
I was just kind of like, see, this is the kind of issues that I have when it comes to interracial romance, and I don't want to be rude or sound like I'm bashing these type of books, but no.
See, that was my problem, because when I tweeted about this like 2 months ago, and some people that were in interracial relationships in real life got offended. But I did not say anything about interracial relationships. I stated that a lot of the times interracial relationships tend to be fine and not so fetishy when the author is the minority. But then when a white author decides to write interracial romances, the minority is typically always either fetishized or their race is like a major aspect of the story. I don't want to read like if one character is white and one character is black, then okay, fine. I probably went in knowing that they were that way. I don't need a constant reminder of him saying that she's black or her saying that he's black or Hispanic or whatever. Like, I don't need constant reminders. Of course, like if you're blending two cultures, like if the character's black and then another character's Mexican and they're blending their cultures, I understand why it's a big conversation. But a lot of times it's not like that. It's just that fact, like someone goes, "Oh, you didn't tell me she was black." And I'm just like, okay, well, okay, I guess. And then it's like there's always some racist family member, and it's always just a bit much.
Have you found that line? This is the line that I find again and again and again in so many interracial romances, and it just like grinds my gears. It's kind of like in YA, that line that people make fun of, like she let out a breath she didn't even know she was holding, and how it's found in like so many young adult books and people make fun of that. Well, this is a line that I find in a lot of interracial romances that just gets to me. And it's like, usually it's like a sexy time scene or like a more intimate scene. And the guy, who's typically white, will be like, the contrast of their skin tones was a turn on, or the contrast of their skin tones was so beautiful and just turned him on. I'm like, what? I just don't understand.
I don't either.
That's the part that always gets to me. But we've had some great comments, like piggybacking off of what you were saying. Birthday says, I'm also very uncomfortable with fetishization, and that's why I'm put off by characters being defined personally / character-wise by race, because it's implying that races are personalities in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And then our hairstyle says, why is it a fetish to like Black girls? Why is it wrong to love Black women when you are white? Why the hate against Latinos, Mexicans? There's more than Mexicans. Preach. Yeah, I feel like writing a good interracial romance is a skill, right? Because you don't want to just like sweep systematic racism under the rug and like it's some magical world where everybody gets along. But you also don't want to harp on it so much that it takes away from the story. This is supposed to be a love story, and it's like you're just reading about how he brought her home and great aunt Carla called her the N-word. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like,
Steph Roman Book Talk says, I can totally agree with you on that.
Troy.
Oh, I haven't read, I don't think, any interracial romances by white authors, which is probably why I enjoy interracials I have read. Same, I've only read, I read quite a few, only because I don't particularly go looking at the authors all the time. Most of the interracial ones I've read have been by Black people as well, or whatever the minority is.
The only interracial romance written by a Black author that I felt was done well is it was actually one of my favorite books of 2017, and it was written by Kennedy Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, the name of the book is completely escaping me, which is terrible. So I'm going to look it up really quickly for people who might be interested. But Kennedy Ryan is a white author, and I am obsessed with her. She's blowing up right now because she has like a lot of
Yes, I love Kennedy Ryan.
taken off. But her book Grip is about a Black man who is trying to become a rapper.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up being a pretty successful one. And he falls in love with the white girl, and it's like a friends to lovers, and they become best friends, and then they like fight their attraction to each other so much because it's like not forbidden, but it's just like not what is expected. Like he's like, he's like entrenched in this hip hop culture, and falling in love with this like white girl who grew up with a silver spoon in her mouth is not necessarily like what's expected. So, and then they have their own demons and things and stuff like that they're fighting. And that's why they fight getting together so much. But I really enjoyed it. And I think it was really well written. And she had this really, really touching poem. Since he's a rapper, he's also like a poet, and he does like spoken word, and he also does raps. She did a really great job writing this one particular scene about police brutality, which I thought was done really well. But I don't know. I really enjoy Kennedy Ryan, and I really loved that book.
She's gotten very big. I hear a lot of people talk about her.
Yeah, she's taken off recently in the past year or so, but the Grip I really recommend. That was like one of the few, or maybe only interracial romance I've written.
Yeah, Romance Book Talk is talking about the Grip series right now.
Oh, she's Black?
I've never seen her face. I don't think I've read anything by her.
I did not know that. I thought she was white. You learn something new every day. Okay, so I guess I've never read an interracial romance by a white author then.
I've never read Kennedy Ryan. I see a lot of her books, but I've never read anything by her.
I always thought that oh my God, she is Black. Shock. You know why I always assumed she was white? Because most of her stories are about white people. So I always assumed. She does throw in like a few different minorities here and there, but for the most part, white people. So I just assumed, which was wrong of me. I should not have assumed. Because really, as an author, you can write whatever you want. This is like blowing my mind right now. I literally am just like, say what?
I don't think I've ever read anything by her. I've never Googled her or anything.
Steph is like, Kennedy Ryan is Black. I'm like, I see, girl. I saw her photo. Ooh, okay. Well, I guess I never have then. I take that back.
She said, yes, she was the first Black romance author to win a Rita this year after 37 years.
Wow. That's so sad.
LOL. Do you see this person like going off in our comments?
Who?
With our hairstyles. This is overthinking at its finest. It's 2019. Everyone likes Black girls. It's the Latinos who are locked in cages.
Oh.
Everyone likes Black girls. Yes, because there is no one on YouTube calling us monkeys anymore and selling makeup palettes.
Ooh, the shade. I'm not even going to touch that one.
There's always like one or two in comments like that. Always. It's just
Birthday says, I don't have anything published right now. I'm just a writer, but I like to pick races randomly. Like I form an image in my head of our new character. I'm trying to challenger character, and I try to remain faithful to the image. I mean, I'm the same way. Like when my characters come to me, they already come fully formed, and they just are who they are. It's just most of my characters tend to be Black or biracial or mixed race. I shouldn't say biracial or mixed race. I don't have a lot of white main characters that come to me these days. When I used to write when I was younger, most of my main characters were white because that's all that I thought was accepted and acceptable. Mm-hmm. But the more I read and the older I got and the more I evolved, that changed. Let's see. Steph says that was only her first series. Now she writes books about all races with major research behind it. Yeah, she does. So she's expanding her horizons. So I'm excited. I did not know that about Kennedy Ryan. That actually makes me really happy. The more you know. Do we have anything else we want to say?
You guys have any other questions? Because we've been on here for almost 2 hours.
There have been so many like amazing comments, and I wish we could like read all of them. But there's so many. They're all great. You guys are like really engaged in the chat. I guess the point of this live is just that Troy and I got tired of seeing romance readers being bashed by people who don't read romance or who go out of their way to read the worst and then therefore go to paint the whole genre with the brush of the worst. I mean, I'm not going to go out there, find the worst young adult books or find the worst fantasy books or find the worst fill in the blank books that I can find and then proceed to say, oh, this whole genre is trash. That doesn't make sense. And also we wanted to join the conversation and kind of out ourselves in a way, even though Troy's already outed herself with all of her videos on her channel, because romance readers are stigmatized and are looked down upon. And we wanted to discuss that. And we wanted to talk about why that is. So if anyone has any questions, this would be a good time. Because we about to wrap this up.
Birthday Fruitcake says, I only have a few mixed race characters. Most of them are specific race. Get in those words, friend.
Yes.
Unlike me.
I guess we can end with some recommendations. Troy, do you have any recommendations for authors or books?
I'm sorry, I was reading comments. Let's see, what have I read recently? All my recommendations are literally on my channel, so I'm trying to figure out things I haven't said before. Recently I really, really liked The Perfect First, but I cannot think about the author's name. Hold on.
I'm like looking through my Kindle right now so I can see if I can recommend anything to y'all.
I think the person's name is something Hughes, Maya Hughes. Okay.
Maya Hughes.
I really read The Perfect First by Maya Hughes, and I really liked it. It was very sweet. So other than that, I've read books last month, but I don't know if I liked all of the books. That might be what the problem is.
Elle Kennedy released her latest 2 books, or latest book in the Briar U series that she has that I really like. I really enjoyed the book that she just released. It's called The Play. I recommend Elle Kennedy in general.
I love Elle Kennedy.
Yes, I recommend her in general, but the Briar U series is really, really good. It's very entertaining. Let's see, what else can I recommend?
Do I have any fictional crushes? Yes, I do. Wow. What? It's like when you ask something, I just draw blanks. I really like Michael in The Kiss Quotient, and I really like, oh my God. Do I even read? Like, what's going on?
You can't think of anything?
I can't think of anything.
You can always just go back. Do you keep like a record of all the books that you've read?
Yeah, on Goodreads.
We could always just put it in the comments after this live.
That's true. But I think my top one is probably Michael from The Kiss Quotient. And I don't know. Let's just pretend I don't read. Any more questions?
The thing is, I don't really have like fictional crushes. I don't. Like I can read a book and really enjoy a protagonist and be like, yes. But I don't take that further and have like a crush. I just like enjoy it in the moment and enjoy it while I'm reading that book, and then I just move on. It's really strange.
That's not strange. Not everyone has fictional crushes.
I have more crushes on like movie crushes, like characters in films or TV shows. I guess
you can physically see.
Yes.
I feel that. I'm going up to see if we missed any questions. I don't think so, though. I think that's been pretty much it. Okay, to answer this question, I did not hate against Latinos.
What question is this?
This is like all the way up saying why is it wrong to love black women when you're white? Why the hate against Latinos? Mexicans, there's more than Mexicans. I was talking about a specific book that was literally a Mexican main character and a black main character, which was literally what I was saying, but okay.
I mean, people are always going to troll. So I didn't really give that too much energy.
Then, yeah, I think that's it. We pretty much answered everything that was weird.
Yeah, I don't really think I have anything else to say in this video. I definitely will be making more romance-related content on my channel, which I'm excited about. But I wanted to do this live stream first. I don't know if I'll be doing like a series or anything like that, but
series are tiring.
Yeah, I don't have the I'm way too inconsistent, I guess. Like I get bored with things very easily, so I don't see me doing anything like that. I mostly want to do more discussion videos around.
You used to do quite a lot of discussion videos.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back into them for sure. All right, guys. Well, we have been on here for about 2 hours. Thank you so much for joining us. We had such a good time talking about this. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. If you are a romance reader, be proud. Wave your romance reading flag high and proud because we are out here, okay? We are out here strong. No such thing as a guilty pleasure. Own all of your pleasures proudly. That's all I have.
Yes. I second that.
All right. Well, we will catch you guys both on our individual channels. I will make sure to link Troy Nicole's channel down below, The Bookish Wallflower, and I will also link that video that I was talking about earlier in this live if I can find it down below. But yes, that's it, and we will see you guys on our next live. Bye.